Good afternoon, AP Human Geographers. Welcome to your first recorded lecture. So we'll do these once or twice per unit, 15, 20 minutes tops, where we take a few slides and we just kind of move forward with content. So instead of you guys going home and reading about this stuff, we're just going to continue lecturing on it. So what we're going to chat about today is regions. If you have worked on your vocab cards, you've seen that there are a couple different forms of regions. So as I go through these, you're taking notes, you can pause me, you can rewind me, you can go back for examples. You're writing down what's on the slide, but you're also maybe adding a little bit more of what we're talking about, right? So the same kind of things we do in class. Think of this as an extension of class notes. Before we get into regions, which we're going to have 3 different kinds of regions, I want to kind of talk about why we create regions. You guys have taken 2 different quizzes of maps that break the world down into regions. So as geographers, why do you think we do that? Why are we breaking the world down into smaller chunks? Well, the answer is because it's easier to study that way. It's really hard to study patterns and processes that exist worldwide. It's a whole lot easier if we break the world down into digestible units that we can study. It's a whole lot easier to go in and study sub-Saharan Africa than it is to study the whole world at the same time, right? It's the same kind of thing in your math class. You know, you're not taking all of your math classes the same year. You have 7 classes in your schedule. Could you take Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, Pre-Calc, Calculus AB, Calculus BC, and ACE Math all your freshman year? Why not just do it at the same time and get it done with? Well, you're probably thinking there's no way I could do that much math, especially since one kind of builds on the other. That's the same type of thing with geography. We're going to break the world down into regions to study. Makes it a lot easier to digest these little chunks. So we're going to talk about 3 types of regions, 3 types of digestible chunks. And just like in everything AP, we have a lot of words for the same thing. Our first type of region is going to be a formal region. We're also going to call this homogeneous, or AKA uniform. So you might see it as a formal region, you might see it as a homogeneous region, which means all the same, or you might see it as a uniform region. A formal region is the easiest one to identify. It's an area where everyone or everything has something in common. There's one characteristic that happens in this region. Most people do this, or it's taking place in this region, it's all the same. Think about a formal wedding, right? Most men would be wearing tuxes. They're all the same. They're dressed alike, formal, the same, homogeneous uniform. Let's take a look at what we can make formal regions out of. Anything that you can measure that's based on fact can become a formal region. So we could talk about population characteristics. We could talk about crop production. We could talk about per capita income, which is how much money people make. We could talk about temperature, rainfall, climate, different languages, religions, ethnicities. All of these can be concrete, measurable things that we can come in and put a border around. Hey, we know most people in the Middle East follow the religion of Islam. So we can put North Africa and the Middle East into one region, one formal region, where we call it the Islamic world. So anything that we can measure and put a clear border around is going to make a formal region. Again, remember, there's a common characteristic throughout. So what kind of things are we talking about here? These are great examples for your flashcards. Our first example of a formal region is going to be the Rocky Mountain region. Essentially, the region of the world where the Rocky Mountains touch. Can I measure that? Can I see it? Is it fact? Yes. Can I put a clear border around it? Yes. Is that a common characteristic throughout these places? Yes. Any town or city on this place is going to touch the Rocky Mountains. That's going to make it the Rocky Mountain formal region. homogeneous, or uniform. Climate zones are another great example of a formal region. They have the same weather patterns, right? So we could talk about, let's do arid. We're talking about the Middle East and Africa, North Africa right here, Middle East, North Africa here. We talked about how we could call that the Islamic world because most people follow the religion of Islam. But we could also identify this as a dry, arid climate, right? We see how it's dry and arid. It matches the code down there. So most of the places here are going to be desert. Can I map it? Yes. Can I measure it? Yes. Can I put a clear boundary around where the deserts begin and where the deserts end? Yes. This makes it a really good example of a formal region. But our best example, the number one example I want you to use should you ever have to write about formal regions on an FRQ and put an example, is political units. So for example, we are all right now sitting in the state of Florida. The state of Florida has common laws, rules, regulations that we all have to follow. Are those common characteristics throughout? Yes. If you want to get a driver's license, if I want to get a driver's license, if anybody living in the state of Florida wants to get a driver's license, there is a set of rules or procedures that have to be followed to get this driver's license. Meaning we all have something in common. Therefore, Florida would be a good example of a formal region. At a bigger scale, kind of zoomed out there, the United States would also be a good example of a formal region. Everybody in the United States, if they're a citizen or if they're just living here, they still have to follow laws, right? And they're common laws throughout the whole country, making it a good example of a formal region. Any kind of political unit is going to be a really good example of a formal region. Last example here of a formal region, we can talk about agricultural crops. You look at this map and you see that we have the Corn Belt. Guess what they grow in the Corn Belt? Well, most people grow corn. So most of the farms in this area are going to be devoted to growing corn. Can we measure it? Yeah. Can we see where it is on the landscape? Can we put a clear border around it? Yes, we can. Meaning, if you live in the Corn Belt, you're a farmer, you probably grow corn. This makes it a good example of a formal region. All right, my personal favorite type of region is a functional region. This is our second type of region. Functional region is also known as a nodal region. I want you to think of a nodal region like this. It looks like that, okay? In the center, you have a node or a core, and that area is going to service the surrounding area. So you're going to have really strong whatever at the core, whatever we're talking about. But as you travel away from the core, it's probably going to become less prevalent. A really good example here of a functional region would be a pizza delivery place. You know, I live in Delray. Most of you guys live in Boca. If I call the place that you get pizza delivered to from your house and say, hey, can you deliver it to my house in Delray? They're probably going to say no. The reason they're saying no is because I'm outside of their functional region. I live too far. The restaurant itself is this dot in the middle, right? The restaurant itself, that's the node. And the area they will go to is the functional region. If I live too far away from that restaurant, they're not going to service me. They're not going to bring me my food to my house because I'm outside of their functional region. Another good example of functional regions that you guys might be a little bit more familiar with than the radio or the television would be cell phones, right? At some point, you could travel far enough away that you're going to lose cell phone service. In order to get the cell phone service, you have to be in the functional region of a cell phone tower. If you get too far outside, too far away from that cell phone tower, you've left that functional region, right? So the cell phone tower itself up in the sky, standing tall, is the node, and the area of which you can pick up the signal is the functional region. If you get outside that, you might lose service, or you might get into another cell phone tower's functional region. Same thing with Wi-Fi, right? If you're too far away from the Wi-Fi, you're not going to pick up the signal. You're outside of the functional region. Driving in a car, you have the radio on. You're going on a road trip, up the turnpike you go. At some point, you start to lose that radio signal. Starts to become staticky, or even maybe another radio signal's coming in from another station. That's because you're in between two functional regions. The further you get from the radio tower, you're not going to be able to pick up that signal. You're going to get static, or you're going to start picking up the signal of another radio tower. Oftentimes in geography, guys, we're going to use cities and their surrounding area as good examples of functional regions. So here we have an area in California, the San Francisco Bay region here. The biggest city in this area is San Francisco. People are going to commute into San Francisco for work, for play, for restaurants, for football teams, for plays, for bars, for any kind of travel daytime situation that you can think of. The region they're going to pull from is their functional region that you see here in this map, right? So maybe if I'm living over here in this blue area, I might have a job in San Francisco, and I might need to commute into San Francisco for the day and then commute back home at night. That's plausible. But at some point, if I get too far outside of the city, that commute's going to be too far. I'm not going to go into San Francisco. I might go to another big city in a different region to commute into work. So the area of the city itself, San Francisco, would be the node, and the area that it pulls from for commuters and entertainment and that kind of stuff would be the functional region. All right, I think the last example here of a functional region is In-N-Out Burger. I've never had In-N-Out Burger, but people who have it talk about it all the time. They really, really, really like it. In-N-Out burgers tend to be clustered over here in the Southwest and up into California, in the northern parts. But they have a couple In-N-Out burgers in Texas. Now, if I want In-N-Out Burger here in Florida, would I drive to Texas to get it? Probably not. That's probably too far, right? It's well outside my functional region. Or conversely, if I wanted them to maybe, I don't know, deliver it to me here in Florida, they're going to say, absolutely not. You're way too far outside of my functional region. So the restaurant itself is the node, and the area that people will come from to go to that restaurant, that is the functional region. All right, we've made it to our last of our three regions. This one's a little tricky, so bear with me. This one we call a perceptual region, also known as a vernacular region. Remember, I need you to know it both ways. Perceptual, vernacular, perceptual, vernacular. And I want you to start thinking about why we call it a perceptual region. And what is a perception? Perception is a thought, right? Something that you think, something that I think, they might not be the same perception. So with this one, it's not going to be like the functional region or the formal region that has really strong, clear-cut borders. This one's going to create fuzzy borders, borders that are unclear because it's based on what we think. It's based on our perception. So with this, I don't want you to write the word fuzzy borders as on an FRQ or anything like that. But I want you to think that the borders are not clear because it's based on people's perceptions. So here we have a map of the United States into Canada up there, and it's talking about perceptual regions of North America. The one that I always want you to use is the American South. So, what is the American South? If I were to give you a blank map, if all of us came into class tomorrow with a blank map and I said, okay, here you go, here's your pen, draw a border around the South. My border that I draw might be different from your border, which might be different from the person sitting next to you's border, because we all have a different perception of what the South is. Is the South where people have an accent? Is the South former Confederate states? Does the South, have a certain political ideology? Does the South have certain characteristics? They listen to country music, they drink sweet tea. What exactly makes the South? Do people watch NASCAR in the South? What you think makes the South, what I think makes the South might be a little bit different. And therefore, where we draw our border might be different. So that makes it a fuzzy border. We don't really know what the South is or where we should start it, where we should cut it off. That's going to make it a perceptual vernacular region. I know a lot of us are from New York or we have family up in New York, right? I hear this a lot. I'm not from New York, but I hear people talk about upstate New York quite a bit. So I went to the internet to try to figure out what is upstate New York. And I ended up with this map. Well, not knowing a ton about New York, upstate New York looks like the whole entire state of New York, minus the bit at the bottom. I probably, if you had to ask me and say, hey, draw a line where upstate New York is, I would probably draw it right here. And this part up here is upstate. But people that are from there have different perceptions of what that is. And so that starts to look a little different. Eastern and Western Europe. Different cultures, absolutely. Different languages, definitely. Different religions. Where do we draw that line, though? Is it a clear cut, right down the middle, Eastern and Western? What I think of Western Europe might be different than what you think Western Europe is. We might include a couple different countries in that idea. Therefore, this is going to be a perceptual vernacular region. All right, guys, cool. So at this point in time, you should know A, why we create regions, B, that there are 3 types of regions, C, what a formal, uniform, homogeneous region is, what a nodal functional region is, and what a perceptual vernacular region is. My expectation is that you're able to produce examples out of your mind onto your flashcards from after watching this lecture. Also, on your tests coming up very soon, I will give you examples and you'll have to pick which one is which. So if you have any questions when I see you again,